Welcome to another episode of the Gustavo Franco podcast. Today, we're joined by Dr. Swaid, a renowned neurosurgeon with a remarkable journey. After moving from Israel to the US at age 16, Dr. Swaid excelled in his medical studies and career. From scoring the highest oral board exam for all neurosurgeons in the United States to his reputation in the news for treating conditions others said were incurable, Dr. Swaid's career skyrocketed. But at every point along the way, he carried two beautiful traits with him: kindness and compassion. He's held several prestigious roles, including medical director of HealthSouth, and he founded the Swaid Vestavia Medical Center, a state-of-the-art facility offering diverse medical services. This episode dives into Dr. Swaid's life, discussing his Israeli roots, the intersection of faith and medicine, his experience in administrative roles, and his insights into the rise and fall of HealthSouth. We'll explore preventative medicine, innovative surgical technologies like the CyberKnife, and his role as chairman of the Certificate of Need Review Board of the state of Alabama. Dr. Swaid also shares his journey in private practice, building his medical facility with an entire surgical center, diagnostic center, and clinics for neurology, orthopedics, and pain management. I got the chance to visit the medical center myself, and to say it's impressive is an understatement. The medical center now hosts over 30 surgical procedures every day. Dr. Swaid also gives us his views on private equity in medicine and offers valuable advice for upcoming medical professionals. Join us for an enlightening conversation with Dr. Swaid. You are now listening to the Gustavo Franco podcast, where we challenge the norms and uncover the truths of our healthcare system. I'm your host, Gustavo Franco. Hey, Dr. Swaid, I'm very excited to have you on the podcast. I feel as if your career in medicine is the pinnacle of medical careers for many people that are actually trying to become doctors and actually going into medicine. They want to quickly rise to administrative positions and then open their own private practices. So I have a ton of questions to ask you. I've been staying with you for the past couple of days, and the more we talk, the more questions I actually seem to have. So very excited to have you here.
Thank you, Gustavo, and I have enjoyed us being together for the last couple of days.
Yeah. So I was thinking of what would be the best place to start our conversation, because there are just so many topics that I want to cover, and everything just keeps taking me back to your background, your life in Israel. You've mentioned it a couple of times, but we haven't really talked too much about it, and I'm sure that has shaped the person that you are today. I mean, leaders across all industries, their childhood has really shaped the leader that they are. So I would love to hear a little bit about your childhood in Israel, when you moved to the US. Yeah.
Sure. So I was born in 1952 in the northern part of Israel, in the Galilee part of Israel. People should know that in Israel, the majority of the citizens today are of Jewish descent who came to Israel from all over the world. There's also about 20% of the population in Israel that are Palestinian or Arabs in descent. And a small minority of those, probably 120,000 today, are actually of Christian descent. They're mostly Catholic, along with other Christian denominations. And so my family belonged to that minority, the Catholic Christians of Israel/Palestine or the Galilee. And our heritage goes back, hundreds of years in that location. Some believe from the time of Christ. And so that's really where I came from, the Galilee part of Israel.
Did you have any fun stories from childhood in Israel?
A lot of fun stories. I think that growing up, we had very little exposure to the rest of the world except through the radio. So we traveled very little. We did not have television or electricity or even running water. Certainly, we did not have cell phones and the internet. And so our source of entertainment was local. We had radio that ran on a big battery, and it was where we listened to news and music, so that kept us somewhat happy. And then we depended a lot on local storytelling. For instance, during cold nights, my grandfather, who grew up under the Ottomans when they ruled Israel/Palestine, and I want to use both words to be sure that people are happy with whatever I say about that. You know, he would sit at night and tell us stories about how the Ottomans ruled Palestine and what he had to go through when he was a young man, basically serving the Ottomans and working for them in servitude almost. Told so many stories that would keep us laughing at night and kept us entertained. So local humor was very important for our psyche, so to speak, because we were so cut off from the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a good, happy childhood. You know, we took school seriously. That was an important part of our life was education, because we were not able to play sports in any organized fashion. So education was always very important growing up. Grade school and high school, you know, you just wanted to be number one in your class. Everybody would try to be number one. So you competed academically from an early age. I would say it was a good childhood. And in my childhood, I think what I learned is that all people have value, and that growing up as a Christian as a minority in a country like Israel, you know, people would come to our home who were Jewish to visit my parents, or Muslim, and then we had the local Christians, and I became exposed to all of those faiths and began to see that I loved certain aspects of all the people that I met. And I think it has served me well the rest of my life to be familiar with how other people are thinking and what they're thinking. At an early age, I listened to these visitors to our home and learned from them a great deal about their background and what concerned them. So yeah, that childhood exposed me to all kinds of people. And I think it has helped me all my life to be comfortable around people of different backgrounds.
Yeah. One aspect that you brought up was the idea of faith. You mentioned that you were around a bunch of different religions, so different kinds of faith. So not just strictly to Christianity, but what do you think the importance of faith is in like a medical setting? And when you become a practitioner, what do you think the role of faith is to providing that best patient care?
So I think the number one thing is to be respectful of other people's faiths. You know, when you become a scientist, you do have a tendency to think that, faith, you know, may not be that important. But I have never actually accepted that. I've always believed that faith is important. I'll say right at the front, I'm not smart enough to know that there's not a God. So I've always felt more comfortable believing there is wisdom behind the design of this universe. So I'll just put it out there.
Mm-hmm.
I see patients who have deep faith go into the operating room with more confidence that they are going to come out of the operation better. And I've always respected that faith is a motivator to hope for a good outcome. And I've always took that very, very seriously. Over the years, I've had patients ask me to pray with them right before they went under anesthesia. And at first, that seemed awkward, but I'm very respectful of it.
Mm-hmm. One thing, a little off topic, but I know your first name is Swaid and your last name is Swaid. Is that a tradition from where you're from?
It is. So in our tradition, the Swaid clan, which is probably about 100 people now in my ancestral hometown, you know, every generation they pick a child and they give that male child his first or Christian name to be the same as the family or clan name.
Mm-hmm.
It's considered somewhat of an honor, and that child growing up feeling as though he carries the family reputation on him. And so, yeah, it's something to live up to. It's considered an honor. And when I finally pass away, they'll pick another kid. It won't be his fault. They'll pick him and they'll give him that name to carry the family name. So, you know, obviously it was an honor and nobody found it unusual in Israel. But, you know, getting to Arkansas at age 16, it was an awkward thing to have to say, I'm Swaid. People could just never connect with that, and you had to sort of explain it. I've always looked for a different first name to sort of adopt, but I've never liked anything other than Swaid.
Yeah. No, that's pretty awesome. One thing that you brought up yesterday during lunch was how they actually made olive oil. I know this is not related to healthcare, but I thought it was a pretty cool story how you had the horses running around this pole.
Yeah.
Could you just explain again how olive oil is made?
Sure. So as a child, that was really entertainment for us because we didn't have anything to entertain us.
Yeah.
But in the winter months, around November, when it begins to get rainy and cold in Galilee, that's the harvest season for olives. So people would go to the olive groves and get their olives harvested, bring them in big sacks, pour them into this big stone-made bowl, and in some way this is connected to a couple of horses that would run around that big, round, grinding stone.
The stone itself doesn't move, or does the
stone itself moves?
Okay.
Part of it moves, the inside of it. And so these horses rotated around as the olives are being crushed.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they are crushed to a certain degree, then they are passed on to the next station where there's a press that actually squeezes the olive oil from that mesh, which then is divided between what's useful olive oil and what's not. And you could actually sit there and see the olive oil coming out of these tubes into the jars that are there to pick it up. And for us kids, we would sit to the side. It's usually warm and cozy inside, and watch this process along. So yeah, that was really something that was a wonderful memory.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Do you think that your childhood there has really shaped the doctor that you are today? I know we talked about it in terms of like faith, but do you think that in other terms that has also shaped like what success might mean to you within a medical career?
Yes, it has. And I'll tell you, one of the surprising things that I learned as a young man coming to America is that when people said, so-and-so is very successful, I wondered what that meant. Because where I grew up, successful meant someone who is smart, studies hard, makes A's, wants to become a teacher or a nurse or a doctor or whatever, and provide a service so they could be helpful to others and so they could be respected. That's what success meant to me.
Mm-hmm.
Service, and through service, gaining respect for oneself. I found out in America when they said, oh, he's very successful. I thought he meant very smart, but it turns out maybe that's not it. They mean he makes a lot of money. So I have never really fallen into the trap of thinking that success can be measured in the amount of money you make. I'm still stuck on this idea that your success is based on how many people you help, whether they love you and appreciate you and respect you and look up to you for good advice and good deeds. So yeah, from childhood, that has stuck with me.
Good. That's a good way of thinking about it. So now let's go into your career, right? I mean, you rose pretty quickly at Brookwood and at HealthSouth to take administrative positions. I would love to hear a little bit about being in an administrative position within a hospital system and at the same time being able to manage patient care. How did you find that balance?
So in all of those positions that I held, I never gave up the actual practice of medicine. That's my first love, is to be in the operating room, doing surgery and taking care of patients. So regardless of what position I was offered, I made sure they understood, the people who offered or elected me to those positions, that I will not sacrifice all of my time to manage or to be administrative. So back then, I had a funny thing to say. I always called the administrative people the suits, and I wanted the scrub suits. So they always understood that I would continue to practice my profession. And then I would very carefully divide my time between patient care and then looking at the business aspect of a hospital, always emphasizing never sacrificing quality of care. So when you begin to look at the financial aspects of running a healthcare institution, you will have opportunities to look at budgets, and there are temptations to try to make more profit. And sometimes that profit can come at the expense of perhaps reducing the quality of care. And I've always been known to say there's a line that you have to draw beyond which you should not go, and never sacrifice patient care and quality outcomes for the sake of profitability. I've always been demanding that we practice quality care. And I found out that those two things are not mutually exclusive. I found out that when you practice the best care, you tend to do the best financially as well. So if you don't cut corners in the delivery of care, you do very well. And as I proved that along, then nobody worried about me becoming administrative because they knew that we would do well on both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah. Do you think that big healthcare conglomerates right now that are being bought up by private equities, they're really trying to increase efficiency and make the most money, they're struggling a little bit in finding that balance?
So from my childhood, my mother was very blunt. She just told you what she thought. and sometimes you recoiled because she was very blunt. So I have to learn not to be as blunt. I think there are pros and cons. The question is, what motivates private equity? What do they really want?
Money.
So if they want money, so then that gives you the answer, that they will look at a sheet, at a bottom line, and they will look at ways in which they want to improve that balance between top line and bottom line. So as long as that does not interfere much with the quality of care, I have no problem with people wanting to make money off of healthcare investments. But that's where the providers of healthcare need to be very careful, so that if they see that the attempt here is to balance it in favor of profitability over good care, that's where the provider should say, no, that should not take place.
When it comes to these like administrative positions or private equities taking on to actually lead a hospital system, do you think it's important for the person actually leading that change to have a medical background? Because I feel as if a lot of the people coming in, they just have MBAs, maybe law degrees too, and they're trying to make all these changes to healthcare, but don't actually have the background in healthcare.
You would hope that that person would have a background in healthcare. I think they should, as a matter of fact. And you would hope that they would be faithful to their mission, because healthcare is a mission in a way. First, do no harm. In that implied the idea that we want to take care of people the best that we can. So if the person running the organization has a healthcare background and has that philosophy, you see, that's good, because they will protect that aspect of things. But then, if they're also business savvy, they could find ways in which to make it profitable. So I think that balance must be maintained for things to work out. If the balance tips in favor of profitability, I have seen situations where quality of care then declined. Mm-hmm. That's not good. So I do believe that someone with healthcare background who is loyal and faithful to the concept of that healthcare can do an excellent job managing the administrative and business sides of any venture.
Yeah. So now I do want to talk a little bit about your time at HealthSouth. You were in an administrative position there, medical administrator. And the story of HealthSouth is pretty interesting. I know a lot of people in my generation don't really know about the story of HealthSouth, but they grew super quickly. I mean, I think they started in 1984. By 1986, they already went public. And from there, things skyrocketed. There were so many mergers and acquisitions. They grew so quickly. And then for 7 years, there was some accounting fraud. And then when that was discovered, it kind of went a little downhill from that. So I would love to hear from your perspective. I mean, you were working there during the time that happened. Love to hear a little bit of the story itself, because I mean, I only know the basics of the story. So I'd love to hear your perspective there.
Yeah. I mean, there are just so many complexities to that story. One aspect of it is a true American success story. I mean, the fellow who started the company came from a small town in Alabama and was very desirous of, succeeding in a big way. So I think that motivated probably a speeded up acquisition process to be bigger than the next guy. I see good and bad in that, but mostly I saw the good at the time. I was involved in the delivery of the healthcare aspect of it. I was not really involved in the, financial aspect on the corporate side. But we grew the healthcare aspect of it rather rapidly. And it was great because the very people who later were involved in all these things that you mentioned were very accommodating to me, asking for equipment, new buildings, new things that we needed to deliver good healthcare. I remember one story where the CEO of that company had a member of his family who needed a brain operation. And he asked me to come to their hospital, and that's before I became medical director of that company. Asked me to do the surgery in their hospital. And I said, your hospital is not equipped for that kind of surgery. And he said, what do you need? I said, well, I need a microscope, I need a laser, and I need a couple of other things. He said, no problem, we'll have all that ready by next week. Within next week, we had all the equipment we needed. We did the operation. It went very well. His relative was great. And he was bragging about it, that we're doing this in my hospital now. But the lesson I learned there is that in many other places, just to acquire that equipment would have been a nightmare. It would have taken... So these people made quick decisions, put the money where you need it, and move forward. And I like that. I like that energy, that desire to improve things. So... on the healthcare side of it, It was great in the sense that we also created a national network, especially for orthopedic surgery, neurosurgery. We brought the first Gamma Knife. Other than in Miami, there wasn't one in the Southeast. So we brought that with the same spirit of let's bring new technology in, let's bring new things to the market. As that was going on, of course, there's the corporate and financial side of things. And that's something that I'm obviously not very privy to, and I'm sorry about how things turned out there. But there's a lesson for people, is that, look, don't spread your wings too far, too fast, and be careful how you report your earnings. I know a little bit more about Wall Street now than I did then, and I think that people, even now, want to look to be more successful on Wall Street. I mean, the stress of performance and reporting profits every quarter, it drives you into this mindset of we must do better next quarter than we did. Sometimes it's toxic, in my opinion. So I think modesty and being happy in healthcare. In healthcare, you should be modestly expecting profits and not thinking that healthcare is a way to just be completely dominant financially.
So in the fraud, like in the accounting fraud scandal, were they just over-reporting their earnings to keep up with the market expectations for their stockholders? Is that?
Again, I'm really not an expert in what really was going on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you'd read in the paper. So for me, it's what you said. It's, ways in which maybe the stock market was told to expect better earnings than maybe they really were. But I must say, it was bricks and mortar. I mean, this was not some made-up scheme. This was a company that delivered good health care to a lot of people throughout the country. So there was nothing fake about that. I can tell you that.
I mean,
as far as earnings and what they were and how they were reported, maybe that's where the problem was.
Yeah. So HealthSouth itself became the largest outpatient surgery center in the
right.
U.S.
That's right.
I mean, and that happened in 15 years from when he started it?
Yeah.
That's pretty phenomenal, honestly.
Yeah, and in that phase of it, it was really, really exciting. There were acquisitions all the time. And yeah, the network spread very rapidly and it became, $5 billion company back then was a big deal.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, growth was tremendously fast. With it came great patient care, in my opinion, all over the country. Even to Australia and England, we began to spread medically. It was an exciting time, but as all things tend to do, sometimes they don't work out.
Do you happen to know at all the story of the company after the scandal? Because it now became Encompass Health.
Encompass Health. So here I was involved with this company. And when, of course, all these fraud things were brought to the surface, I went back to my roots, which is practicing medicine at the first hospital that I was in, and was happy to do that. It was all fine. I did not lose a night's sleep over, giving up administrative and going back to pure healthcare. The company went on, consolidated. The people who ran it since then have done a good job. I'll tell you a funny story. A couple of years ago, I saw a patient, and I was going to do surgery on this patient and was conversing with her. And I said, "What do you do?" She said, "I'm a healthcare executive." I said, "Really? Where are you an executive of healthcare?" She said, "At Encompass Health." And I said, "What's that?" She said, "Dr. Swaid, that's HealthSouth." I said, "Oh, my God." So they changed the name to Encompass Health and are doing very well. They've consolidated. They're focusing more so on inpatient rehabilitation. So they gave up all the acute care hospitals, they gave up all the outpatient surgery centers, and they gave up all the outpatient physical therapy facilities. So they've consolidated into that one aspect, inpatient rehabilitation, and are doing very well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool. So big part of the company's story was the mergers and acquisitions. Mergers and acquisitions are also becoming bigger and bigger now with the private equity firms that we talked about earlier. What do you think the role of these mergers and acquisitions are nowadays? Do you think, what do you think the positives are? What do you think the negatives are?
So again, my mother's being blunt. Some of those are not good. I mean, the whole antitrust idea with President Teddy Roosevelt, the whole idea is you don't want anything to become so big that they dominate and then they name their prices, so to speak.
Yeah.
You don't want that because then you have monopolies that could become very harmful. So to an extent, mergers and acquisitions are good, but if they become too voluminous, if you will, and too rapid without careful thought, they could be harmful. And I'll tell you one thing about the HealthSouth story. There was the acquisition of the outpatient surgery centers. I later heard that they paid way too much for them because ego demanded that we need to be the biggest to be viewed favorably. So they paid too much for this acquisition. That may have put the company behind the eight ball financially, necessitating maybe some fudging of numbers. I'm not saying on whose part that was because I don't know the person that may have done that. But so you see, if you are so desirous to acquire and you pay so much for something, then you may put the whole company at risk. There's a book, since you guys are at Georgetown, and I'm very proud of you and Kaysen being there. There's a book that I saw in the business section of the bookstore the other day. It's called Ego is the Enemy. And part of it is about what I'm talking about, that if you let your ego dictate mergers and acquisitions, you may make a bad mistake. But in general, they always say that acquisitions and mergers may improve efficiency. I always see that, but bluntness, I wonder if that means we could improve profits. And I wonder if that means that now we have a big footprint so we can go to the payers, to the companies who pay the bills for healthcare and demand more money. That's how it might seem to me sometimes. And when I hear mergers and acquisitions and increased efficiency, I hear firing some nurses, firing some physical therapists or whatever. So those things I hear, and that way I know that we should protect against that. So if a merger does not result in the reduction of the quality of care, I'm good with it. But if the purpose of it is to improve profits over healthcare, one must be very careful not to do that sort of thing.
I mean, it's interesting because in the aspect of improving profits, the US has maybe the lowest number of midwives per 100,000 births. All other countries have a lot more midwives than they have physicians actually taking charge of the birth. But the US has more physicians than it has midwives. And that many times is listed as one of the reasons as to why we have such bad maternal mortality rates. So I think that's interesting. And it also kind of gets into the point of like, how can we try to achieve the same outcome, maybe a slightly worse outcome than we would otherwise, but at the same time improving profit, So
that's a good point. We do things differently in this country. Our healthcare system is such a big ship. It's really hard to make it turn very quickly. We've gotten used to certain things that other countries are not used to. And therefore, we do spend a lot more money on healthcare per capita in this country than they do anywhere else in the world, probably twice as much as the next country behind us. And so that doesn't always translate into better outcomes. And that's sad because we have the brain power. We have the ability to innovate, to discover new things. This is a great country. We have a lot of brain power here. Others do, but we probably have among the best. But it doesn't always translate into the better outcomes clinically. And that's the next challenge that we should look at ourselves carefully and honestly in healthcare. Can we do better on mortality rate? Of course, the problem is our population in this country is not homogeneous. And so you have different cultural approaches to things. Maybe Germany is a lot more homogeneous than we are, and they could sort of follow the same rules, if you will. So that does hurt us a little bit. But in general, we have to be serious about improving outcomes and spending less money on healthcare.
Yeah. Well, from your point of view, I mean, having held these administrative positions and starting your own private practice, where do you think we fall short in being able to actually provide the best patient care to ensure that mortality is not that high? Because, I mean, as we just said, we spend 1.7 times more than Germany, who's the second highest spender, but at the same time, we rank 47th in life expectancy and 82nd in burden of disease. Where do you think our system has to actually improve on itself to be able to increase our life expectancy?
And we're the people who went to the moon. So you could see how embarrassing those statistics are being spoken of towards the country that went to the moon, which is not an easy thing to do. So, you have to look at the basics. We need to demand excellence in this country. We need to instill in our physicians and healthcare providers a spirit of excellence. Mediocrity should not be allowed. So there are hospitals where some providers, some doctors, and some other healthcare providers are not giving the best outcomes with their patients. But somehow the healthcare system finds a way to allow these people to continue to do what they do. And if you come down on these people, you're accused of being, oh, wow, you're so aggressive, So I think you have to start with the point of care by the providers and demand excellence. I have a vision of every medical school talking to their students about how important it is to be an excellent doctor. Not a good doctor, an excellent one. And that if you're not excellent by measurements that can be made in your practice, you need to find a way to improve your ability to deliver good care. So we must demand excellence in the delivery of healthcare. The other thing, of course, that we have a problem with in this country is access to healthcare. And so there are communities that find it very difficult to get good care because of their socioeconomic status. And we need to find a way in which to feel these people's needs, have compassion. Speaking about, faith, compassion to me is a most important component of faith. So we need to find a way in which to provide that care that allows us then to help people not become so chronically ill with diseases that could have been treated, which then would save money on the other end because they would not need as much care later on. So I think we have a problem with access to healthcare, and we have a problem with thinking of doctors as mini CEOs and mini businessmen, and I don't like that. I want a doctor to be a doctor. Now, in addition to that, if they do a good job with their finances, great, but remain faithful to the mission of care. Improve access to healthcare. And there are different proposals how to do that. And, some people talk about Medicare for all. I don't like it. The system we have, if done well and honestly, is a very good system. So we don't need to change it in such a drastic way. I like incremental change. Look at every aspect and say, how can we make that better? But not come with these bombastic statements about, we will revolutionize healthcare. The American people have gotten used to certain things that are not easy to change. If you need to have an MRI scan of yourself, of some part of your body today, you'll have it in a couple of days. In Canada, you have to wait 6 weeks. If I told one of my patients you'll have to wait 6 weeks to have an MRI of their head or spine, they'd pretty much look at me with cross-eyed and say, what is wrong with you? See, our people expect certain things. We need to deliver those things to them in a smart way, but there are ways to do it without wasting a lot of money. There are ways to do it. And I think one other thing that we need to do to reduce cost is to begin to carefully look at the patients we treat and ask ourselves the following question. Does this patient need to be in a hospital for this particular problem? Or can they be treated for that problem more efficiently, with equally, if not better outcomes, and with a lot of less cost if they're treated in a different setting? And that brings us up to the ideas that I've had over the years of using the Gamma Knife, the CyberKnife, and now an outpatient surgery center that can do all of these things as I described, efficiently, great outcomes, and cost effectiveness. So the more of that shift we can create in our healthcare system is going to improve efficiency and outcomes and is going to reduce cost. So those are the things that I love to think about and execute.
Yeah, we're going to get into all those topics that you just mentioned because I think they're fascinating. But one thing that you did touch on here was the idea of preventative care versus treating patients that already have these chronic conditions. A lot of other countries spend a lot more money and time trying to prevent people from getting conditions in the first place, whereas we try to treat those conditions once they come about. Do you think the US lacks in preventative care? What are your ideas on it?
I can't believe that we talked about bluntness and my mother that early. She seems to be coming to my mind every time you raise a point. You're so right, Gustavo. You're so right if you mean to say that we are spending less on preventive healthcare. You're right, we are.
I don't know if this is exactly right, but I'm pretty sure 86% of healthcare spending actually goes into treating chronic conditions that have already come about. Yeah.
And I'm surprised that there's 14% left. Frankly, I thought it'd be less than that. We just don't emphasize preventive care in this country. We talk about it, but where are the resources going? They're not going to prevention. They're going to treating sick people. Prevention, well, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? So this is a saying. So we have got to look at this more seriously. You know, an occasional first lady will say, oh, you know, I have a big pulpit. It's the White House. We're going to exercise more and do this and do that. And then it fades away. We need to take this on as a national commitment to preventive care and put resources there in every community, especially the socioeconomically disadvantaged communities. We've got to put resources to encourage people. You know, people think it's fun to lay on the couch and not get off the couch for 18 hours watching TV. I mean, we almost encourage that. We say that, oh, I'm really binging on Netflix. Really? Don't binge so much, please. Get up and walk around a little bit. I mean, there are so many things that culturally we could do. Maybe commercials on TV even to educate, 1-minute segments of education to motivate people to do simple things that can change their lifestyle and can result in tremendous benefits medically. We're not doing that.
I mean, I think just look at how much that the money going into preventing smoking has actually saved us in healthcare costs. I mean, if we smoked at the same rates that we did 40 years ago, our healthcare costs right now would be so much higher. And just that money that we originally put into preventing smoking and all these ads against smoking have saved us so much money in the long run. But I think that one of the big problems here is that, okay, you can put all of this money into ads to help people prevent and stop smoking. And now, sure, we can try to do that for exercise, but the change that we're going to see is not going to come immediately, right? And I think that this is one of the big reasons why we're not seeing change, because these insurance companies and many of the other companies, the healthcare companies, want to see immediate profit and immediate money coming in. So this would be a long journey. And I think that a lot of companies just aren't willing to go through that.
You put it very well. And the smoking you used as an example is an excellent example of how prevention can prevent so much expenditure and pain and misery later on in one's life. So yeah, I think we should look at these issues. And how about this, create criteria where if you're covered lives, if you're an insurance company, do certain things to improve their health. How about giving them a break on their premiums, And, well, it may affect, as you say, immediate profitability, but in the long term, if less people get sick, you will save money. So this is wisdom. This is looking downstream. So I think that you're exactly right. I think prevention can reduce the cost of healthcare in a tremendous way and improve lives. So may I get personal here,
Please,
as Bernie Sanders would say too. Last night I saw you and my sons working out. The first thing I did this morning? I got up and worked out more than usual. You could get motivated by associating and being around people who believe what you just said, that, hey, let's don't smoke, okay? That's not cool. Let's walk, let's exercise. Take 10 pounds and do some sets with them. We need to motivate our people to get more physically active. If you look at certain studies, the caloric intake of our population, some people argue that it really has not gone up as much as people think. It may be that our level of activity has decreased so much that we're now suffering the ill effects of that. So if we could motivate each other to be more mindful of simple life changes that could help us, it could have a tremendous impact.
Yeah, I think motivation is a big thing that you brought up. And I think it can come in so many ways. It can come in a monetary way or literally just seeing other people do it. And I mean, you want to be part of that group, right? I also have a personal example of that. So I have the Whoop, which is a fitness tracker. I mean, it shows you how good your sleep is, how much you're exercising. And it's pretty neat. I really like it. So I got my dad a Whoop. And my dad wouldn't exercise too much. I mean, he would exercise a healthy amount, but then I got him the Whoop. And we can connect with each other and he can see the exercise that I'm doing. So now he sees that I'm getting good sleep and he wants to get good sleep. He sees that I'm exercising. He wants to exercise, So I think that this interpersonal motivation goes a long way. But I also really liked your point about insurance companies maybe giving premiums to people who do that. So what if an insurance company partnered with Whoop, partnered with Apple, with the Apple Watches, and could connect to see how much exercise they're doing. And if they're doing a lot of exercise and they're staying healthy, they could maybe give some money back to them or reduce their premiums,
That's exactly the way it should work. That's exactly the way it should work. And now we can monitor. So somebody doesn't come in and says, I walked 10 miles this week, give me a premium. No, we can monitor. So everybody should have some kind of a device. Mine, Gustavo, may not be as advanced as yours, but every day I look, all right, 3,500 steps so far, plus the 3,000 I did on the elliptical. So every day when my boys have been home for Christmas holiday from school, I brag about it. I go show Christian or Kason, look here, how many steps I've done today. And it becomes a motivational thing for me to do it every day. So little things like that, a parent can incentivize a child and vice versa. And those things are very important, like you and your dad do. You sort of connected through that one thing, improves your relationship and your health at the same time.
And I think there's a big difference there, as you mentioned, between telling versus showing someone, right? So I could tell my dad, oh, I think you should start working out more. I think you should do a little bit more time on the bicycle. But if I actually do it myself and I show that he can see that I'm doing it, he's going to be more motivated to do it. So, I think that if we start trends like that, everyone is just going to become healthier.
You have just said something that is so important. Gustavo, we hear everybody say, eat less and exercise more. Wow, what a cliche. If you don't mind, to become personal again, my wife, Christy Swaid, brag about her, 6 times world champion jet ski racer. She's very committed to physical fitness. She runs an organization called HEAL, H-E-A-L, Healthy Eating, Active Living. And what they do is they don't say, eat less and exercise more. They actually go into schools, grade schools, high schools, and now colleges, and actually show the PE teachers, the physical education teachers. I know you have an audience in Europe too, so PE is physical education. And they actually show them exactly how to do this. So it's hands-on training. And it has heart rate monitors that documents their level of activity, the duration of that activity, their heart rate during that activity. It serves at least 40,000 students in the state of Alabama this year. And that is one way to begin to teach people hands-on how to exercise more in a safe manner, as well as how to eat more healthy foods. And so there's room for that to grow nationally, and that is one great first step towards prevention. So I'm proud of what she does.
Yeah. I think going into schools is super big. We have health class in school, but I never really learned about how to best optimize my health to live healthy and live long. I remember in my high school, at least, a lot of people didn't used to take the class seriously because the teacher was very overweight and in class would literally have snacks and chocolate. But at the same time, he would be telling us to eat salad and exercise a ton. So I just thought it was a little controversial and is a problem that, as we discussed before, is telling versus showing someone what to actually do, right? So if you're going to preach something, I think you actually got to do that thing.
And the other thing that is cultural in this country is the PE teacher and people in general seem to idolize the jocks. The guys who are already in good shape, they're fast. And so the kids who are in school but who are not like that feel intimidated and they give up on exercise because they say, I will never run a mile as fast as that guy. So why should I even try? And what this program that my wife works on is it levels the playing field for everybody. We don't care how fast you run the mile. What we care is that you do run it, walk it, jog it, but show us that your heart rate rose to a certain level that you can monitor. So now the kids who feel awkward in PE say, hey, I can do this and get an A in PE. I don't have to run as fast as that guy. So we need to bring up the kids who are self-conscious about exercise. We need to let them that exercise is a source of good, not a source of humiliation or bad. And it's a cultural thing. What high school in America doesn't think that the QB of the football team is the coolest guy? And then I see them at age 45 and they look like a worn out old guy that's, really? You were the cool guy? Not so much now, So preventive health behavior should be a lifelong profession, not just during high school, but carry it with you the rest of your life.
Yeah, and I think a good point about that is also educating the parents about exercise. Because, in school you can tell the kids or show the kids that they should be more active, they should eat better. But then if they go home and their parents are doing the complete opposite of that, I think it's counterintuitive. So, I just think that teaching the parents as well to the same thing that they're teaching the kids there is super important.
Exactly. In our endeavor, we're actually seeing the reverse now, that the kids go home and teach the parents that you should be doing this. And then my wife gets letters of testimonials from kids saying, you won't believe, I talked to my grandmama about cooking things a certain way, and she said, I'm going to get off this couch and walk with you, sweetheart. So now the kids are motivating the grandparents. Look, there's the moonshot, there's the effort to build the nuclear bomb, there's the effort to have a vaccine for COVID. All these are national endeavors that are amazingly great. We need a national endeavor to emphasize preventive healthcare. We need that. And we need leadership that's legit, that is credible. As you say, if some guy who's not taking care of him or herself is telling you to do better, you might say, yeah, really? So we need credible people to get out there and show that this is the way to go in the future.
Yeah.
I appreciate you emphasizing preventive healthcare. I really do.
Yeah. And I just want to get back to a point that you made earlier on when we were talking about the administrative side of things. Yeah. It's important to have someone that understands health and business so that we can get a win-win, right? Where we win in earnings and profit, but we also win in patient care.
Right.
And everything that we're talking about, I think, matches exactly with that, right? I know that in the short term, it's going to cost us a little bit, but it doesn't cost nearly as much as treating chronic conditions really does. So we can just put a little bit of money in there and we would save a lot in the long run. And at the same time, more importantly, in my opinion, we're making people actually healthier, right? We're giving, let's say even if insurance companies decided to partner with Whoop and give their members a device so that they can monitor how much exercise they're doing so that they can deduct from their premiums, well, people are going to be more inclined to exercise, more inclined to live healthier lives, which, should be the number one goal of healthcare, right? We want people to be healthier. And at the same time, in the long term, they're going to be less likely to get all these conditions that cost insurance companies so much money.
Exactly. And I think that we should give it to them for free. Find a way to provide it so that you don't have to go buy it. We're going to give it to you. But here's what you've got to do. And man, that could be incredibly, if it became ubiquitous in our society, and if we made just incremental changes in how we live our lives, we could do very well. In management, I don't want to come across as if that profits are not important. They are. They're important. But if you provide good care and manage a situation where you're not wasting money, you could do both. And I've had to do that. So one of the hospitals I took over early on in the HealthSouth story, I didn't know what EBITDA was, right? So some guy in a meeting was talking about EBITDA. And I'm like sitting here saying, well, talk to me about brain aneurysms. I could communicate that. But they're talking EBITDA. So what I did is I went and got a business book and learned what EBITDA was. So I said, what is our EBITDA? The guy says it's, 5 million or 7 million. Well, based on all the companies I studied about, that was peanuts, So I said, we need to do things to change that, to make it better. Well, what can we do? Well, the first thing I said we don't do is touch quality care. We're not going to fire any nurses or do this or do that. How about we bring in some specialists who do the kinds of surgeries that are really beneficial to us? Oh, okay. So we go out and recruit these people and they come in and we say, look, what do you need to practice the best care? And they say, I need the following equipment. We go buy these equipments and they begin to practice at our hospital, whereas they were somewhere else just 6 months ago. And we look and we churn, and 18 months later we look and our EBITDA is 18 million. And all these suits come and go, how'd you do that? I go, wow, it was really easy. We just practiced good health care. We didn't spend money unnecessarily. We bought the equipment. That's an investment. And now the surgery is being done using those equipments, are generating great profits. So there you go. And so I think making profits is important, especially to investors now with private equity. But there are ways to do it that are smart and does not sacrifice. And why I keep repeating this is because I am mistrusting of people's motives sometimes in business. I don't know if you're going to ask me about outpatient surgery, but I can easily increase my profitability by 10%. I know exactly where to do it. But the question then becomes, is it worth it? Is it really worth it when quality of care is considered? And so you have to be careful how to balance quality of care And you may ask me what that means, and I could say, people say quality of care. I could tell you exactly what I mean by that versus profits. And I think you could do both, but you can't be greedy.
Yeah. The story that you just said about giving the doctors what they actually need to do the best procedures that they can, I think that's also motivation, right? Because you're giving the doctors the tools that they've always wanted to work with. You're giving them everything that they need. You're not keeping stuff away from them. So they're more motivated now to actually do the best that they can instead of just holding back because they have these pretty bad tools that they don't want to use. You know what I mean? I actually have a little personal motivational story that kind of goes onto the monetary motivation that we mentioned when it comes to insurance companies maybe partnering with these health devices. Money is a motivator in itself, right? A lot of people, I think, can look at this idea and say, oh, a lot of people might just get these devices and not wear them. But if there's a monetary incentive there, it might bring these people to start doing things that they never did before. One example of that is my New Year's resolution with my family. Both my brothers, my father, and my cousin, we got together. We each put $500 in. And for every single day in January, we have to do something or avoid something. And we have to text at the end of the day that we did that or if we didn't do that. And at the end of the month, if someone didn't do that or did that, they lose their $500 and everyone else splits that money, right?
Yeah, that's great.
What I'm doing is I'm reading a book every day. Not a full book, but I'm reading from a book. Yeah, I'm reading a bit from a book every day and then I say that I did that. My dad is avoiding alcohol, dry January. So every night he texts in the chat, didn't drink. Boom. If he does drink in January, well, we're all splitting the $500. But I mean, there, I think we have both aspects of motivation. You have everyone else in the family they're doing something that's challenging for them and tracking that every day, and you're seeing that they're doing that, so you're more motivated to do it. And at the same time, you have the monetary incentive because you don't want to lose $500, right?
Absolutely.
So I think that's really cool, and I think that nationwide we can start programs that can try to get at both of those things too.
Agreed. That's a great story. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I want to talk a little bit about the Certificate of Need Review Board that you're in here in Alabama. Yeah. You're the chairman of it. Yeah. Well, what do you guys really do there?
Oh, yeah. Well, so some states in this country have Certificate of Need boards. Some states had those and eliminated them. Some have eliminated them and brought them back. And what these boards do is they look at medical projects that are proposed to be built within the state. And if these projects exceed a certain amount of money to be spent on that project, among other criteria, this agency looks at the proposed project, studies it as to whether it's needed or not, and then a board comes in and votes on whether this project should move forward or not. Now, that project could be the building of a new hospital, the expansion of a hospital, the building of an outpatient surgery center, the building of assisted care living facilities. So pretty much all healthcare projects within the state come in for review by this board. And so it's looked at favorably by the people who think it's filling a great positive function. And there are people who don't like it because it restricts their ability to go do whatever they want in building healthcare facilities. So it has a negative and a positive. In my view, it's a very good thing. And here it comes back again to quality. You know, what kind of service is being offered to be a new service and who is providing that service? So if that's looked at very carefully and the answer is it's a good needed project provided by competent, able people, great, go forward. But if it doesn't meet those requirements, then we say no. Now, where there is increased capacity to do something, utilization of that something will increase. It seems that's a business equation. Increased capacity seems to increase demand for that thing. Well, in healthcare, that could be disadvantageous. So an example of that was that when you needed to have an MRI scanner put in the state of Alabama, you needed to have a CON, Certificate of Need, to allow you to do that. Now, you don't have to have a Certificate of Need to put in an MRI diagnostic machine anywhere you want. Before the CON gave up control over that one entity, the number of MRIs done in the state, let's say, was 10,000 studies a year. After the CON was relaxed, so to speak, I think that number went up to 200,000. So that right there proves the idea that if you create capacity, meaning places to go have this, people will go and have them, whether it's really absolutely necessary or not, therefore increasing healthcare costs tremendously. Now, you have to balance that against the possibility of missing some things if you don't get an MRI scan. So that's where excellent healthcare practice comes in. Excellent doctors will know when to order an MRI scan and when not to order an MRI scan. So that's where you need the excellence education of doctors. But you could see in what I said that utilization has increased so much that it then backfired. So that's what the CON board is supposed to do. In essence, it's supposed to create healthcare facilities where they are needed so that access can be improved, but it's also looking out not to increase utilization in a way that will make healthcare cost skyrocket. So that's what we try to do.
And if you have expert physicians, they know exactly how to use that system, right?
Exactly.
Instead of just ordering a bunch of tests that are unneeded or forgetting to order tests when they are needed.
That's right.
Okay. That's really cool. That's really cool. Now, two pieces of, I guess, robotic or radio equipment that you use, I think, are the Gamma Knife and the CyberKnife.
Yes.
I think those are super cool. I don't really know much about them. I know about the Da Vinci robot, which is somewhat different. I mean, you sit in a different entity and then you have the robot in there that has a ton of like arms in it. And those little arms, as you move your own arms in that little entity, the arms of the robot go into the patient and do the whole procedure, which I think is sick. But I don't really know much about the CyberKnife and the Gamma Knife, so I would love to hear a little bit about each of them.
Yeah, so very quickly, the CyberKnife and the Gamma Knife came first, and the CyberKnife was the next generation, so to speak. They're both designed initially and mostly to treat, I say lesions. What I mean by that, when a neurosurgeon says lesion, he or she means a brain tumor or a blood vessel abnormality within the brain that in the past used to require general anesthesia, shaving of the head, or maybe in some places not shaving it, and then making an actual incision and removal of the skull and entry into the brain to remove the tumor or to remove the arteriovenous blood vessel malformation, and treat some other entities that can go wrong with brain function. So the Gamma Knife was a first attempt at avoiding all of these steps and treating the patient with those conditions using focused beams of radiation that can actually go to where the problem is within the brain and using the energy from this radiation to kill the cells of that tumor, for instance, while at the same time protecting the health of the surrounding healthy brain tissue. One danger of radiation, if given to the whole brain, is that it can damage not only the tumor, but also the good brain around it. And so the Gamma Knife was an attempt to focus that radiation in a way that we destroy the tumor and we spare the good functioning brain tissue around it. It is done under local anesthesia, and it is done on an outpatient basis, and it can save people a great deal of misery and cost. It was first brought in by Swedish doctors and scientists, so it reminds us Americans that, hey, not everything happens within this country, that other people are very smart and thoughtful, and we're appreciative of that. To do the procedure under local anesthesia, we injected local anesthetic into the scalp and put the patient's head in a metallic frame to hold their head steady while the radiation was delivered by this very special machine called the Gamma Knife. And then they would receive the treatment. And I think I showed you a picture of President H.W. Bush visiting our clinic to see how the procedure was done. He was really fascinated. He was a great guy, great man. And so that was the Gamma Knife. So here's an advancement where we decrease the amount of suffering and pain and recovery that the patient would need to recover.
So there's absolutely no incision into the patient.
No incision.
Everything is just done externally, and you can actually target the tissue inside of the brain, a specific tissue, while at the same time leaving all of the other tissue healthy.
Exactly.
Okay.
With accuracy of less than a millimeter. So we could deliver the radiation precisely to a spot and avoid damage to the surrounding tissues. That's exactly right. But we still had to inject local anesthesia and use this head frame, which was somewhat cumbersome. So the idea was, can we do that without the head frame? So now the CyberKnife came in. And the CyberKnife doesn't even use that. So we went from no general anesthesia, but yes to local anesthesia, and now we went to no anesthesia of any kind. So the CyberKnife was completely painless in the way it delivers the same concept, different technology, but the same concept will deliver the radiation to the brain lesion in a very precise manner with zero pain of any kind. So you could see that I immediately jumped on that, and after 10 years with the Gamma Knife, we brought the CyberKnife to Birmingham, and it has offered a great number of people a lot of good.
So correct if I'm wrong. You can have a little brain tumor, and now instead of getting a whole surgery for it, you can just lie down at a table, and this machine will be right outside your head.
Yeah.
And radiation will basically just go through your head without you feeling anything, no anesthesia, no nothing. You're just lying down there, kill those specific cells while at the same time leaving other tissue healthy, and then you're done.
I could not have said it better.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, that's sick.
And then the next thing was, all right, why should we partial to the brain? How about we use that same technology for a lung tumor or for a prostate tumor? So then the CyberKnife allowed us to go to other parts of the body besides the brain. So now it's still well utilized for, say, prostate cancer or some lung cancers. So the technology is fascinating and amazingly good. And again, it meets these criteria of how do we provide better outcomes with less complications, more comfort for the patient, and less expensive. So all those criteria are met with new technologies. And that's why I'm a big fan of new technologies that could actually bring a benefit to the patient, because that's the centerpiece of healthcare is the patient.
Where do you see these technologies in, say, 30 years?
I mean, with the recent changes with AI, I just wish that I was like 40 right now and starting out. I mean, Neuralink, ideas that would allow us to begin understanding the genetics relative to certain diseases and how we can now bioengineer ourselves out of some of these problems are just so amazingly fascinating. So I can't specifically say, but I can tell you that it's going to be an exciting ride in the next phase of healthcare.
For the CyberKnife in specific, right? Right now, do you just have the physician sitting in a separate room and they're basically with a radiation camera targeting exactly where it is, or how does that work?
The machine does this all on its own. We feed the information that we want to be precise, and the robot takes care of all of it. The physician and the radiation technologist are, as you said, sitting in a different room, monitoring the action and watching the patient in case the patient needed us for any reason. And so this is all done robotically without any touching by any healthcare provider.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Where it's been tremendously helpful, there's a disorder called trigeminal neuralgia.
How do you say that again?
Trigeminal neuralgia.
I'm not even going to try it.
Yeah, this is a disease that is really miserable. It causes patients to have this severe incapacitating pain in their face because of irritation of one of the cranial nerves, a nerve at the base of the skull called the trigeminal nerve. It's the nerve that allows you to feel your face when you touch it. And when things go wrong with that nerve, it can result in this incredibly incapacitating pain called trigeminal neuralgia. And we can actually use the CyberKnife to target that nerve within the brain and focus the radiation onto that nerve, disrupt its physiological function in a way that the pain goes away without us having to open the skull and go in and do the surgery manually. So that was one area where I developed some expertise and published some papers on that. And it's been one example of how you took something so incapacitating and avoided expensive and painful open surgery and did this, what you described earlier. A patient lays on the table for 35 minutes, gets the treatment, he doesn't feel anything or she doesn't feel anything, and they go home. And 85% of the time they go, "Thank you, doctor, I am so much better." Then we get them off of all of the medications they were taking to control the pain, and a lot of them go on and live a wonderful life without this terrible incapacitating pain.
Yeah.
Some of these patients actually would not shave one side of their face because it would result in exacerbation of the pain. So it's one of those cases where you see a patient who is so miserable and depressed, and then they're smiling and they give you a hug. And really, that's what medicine is all about.
Are there any drawbacks to using radiation?
In that particular case, the things we consider to be a complication or a bad side effects would be that the pain goes away, but the patient may develop some tingling and numbness in the face. But most patients are happily able to trade the numbness for the pain. So that's really about the worst that we expected from it.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Now I want to go into your private practice.
Yes.
I have a ton of questions here. I mean, I think it's super interesting topic. We went to visit the whole medical clinic today, the medical center. And I mean, I was shocked. It literally looked like a whole hospital system in there. You now have, there is pain management clinic, the neurology clinic, the orthopedic clinic, a whole diagnostic center, a whole surgical center. I mean, it was super cool. So I would love to just hear about the story of how it all started and how it actually grew to what it is today.
Thank you. So, as we said earlier, I have been practicing in private practice after my training at University of Alabama School of Medicine and UAB residency and all of that. I've been in practice, we call practice, performing what we are trained to do, since 1981, and have served in many capacities at hospitals. Through that, I looked at what can be done more efficiently. And I've learned over the years what to do that could be different than what's being done and how to do it better. And so out of all of these years of experience, I decided to build this outpatient facility where patients come in and they are the centerpiece of healthcare. Not the doctors, not the owners of the company, the patient. So I imagined an 80-year-old person from a small town who comes to Birmingham, which is the big town in Alabama, and they're told to go to the hospital, you have to park at this parking lot and follow the yellow line to this elevator and then go to floor number 6 and blah, blah, blah. You almost have to have a PhD in geography to know how to get to a place, So there are a lot of inconveniences for the patient. So I imagine this patient from a small town coming. So they come to our clinic, they pull up. There's, I imagine that the service should include valet parking so they could help them park, tell them exactly where to go within the building. I see them and I say they need an MRI scan. Well, in the past, you would see them and send them off to another facility. So they have to check in again and have the MRI there. And then they come back to see you and then you say, well, now you need an operation to fix this problem. Well, now they come to this building that we built and they are seen by the physician. If they need a diagnostic test like an MRI or a CAT scan, it's done right then and there in the building. And within a short period of time, I'm looking at the results of the studies, and I know what the problem is, and I share that with the patient. We could bring a patient in, do their diagnostic studies, plan their surgeries, do the surgery in the center, and send them home the same day. Now, generally, the diagnostics are done one day and the surgery is scheduled for later, but they all go home the same day. And what I decided to do is, look, there are a lot of surgeries that are done in the hospitals. Now, this may have been going on already in different states, but in the state of Alabama, there had not been a freestanding outpatient surgery center where significant spine procedures were done or significant joint replacement procedures were done. So we were first to do these things beginning about 3.5 years ago. And so it was all in an attempt to make the patient the center of healthcare, make it as convenient and comfortable for them as possible, send them home the same day, and at the same time cut cost. So when I look now at the business side of my center here, our center, the business side is that we see that we save the payer, the insurance company, we save them a great deal of money when we compare what they pay us versus what they pay the hospital for the same procedure if it was done there. Now, admittedly, not every patient is best suited for outpatient surgery. So that's where the physician's judgment should come in and make sure that we do things in the outpatient setting that are safe. But when that is the case, it is tremendously beneficial to the patient and to the healthcare dollar, so to speak. So we just said, let's do it. And having decided to do it, we went ahead and came up with a plan. We went to the state, got a CON, a certificate of need, to do this project, and we have done it. And I think now it's become almost a model that a lot of people in the state want to follow. And they go, oh gosh, look, they're doing outpatient hip surgery out there. Can we do it? And I'm happy for that to happen. Let there be more centers like this that would provide safe, hopefully quality care and cut healthcare costs. And I think in the aggregate, it will begin to make a difference in the future. But ours has done a great job. In fact, one of the funniest compliments somebody paid us a week or two ago, it was a doctor who had his own surgery there. And he wrote a note to our manager saying, your surgery center is the Chick-fil-A of surgery centers in terms of its efficiency and the way things moved. And we thought that was a funny but really a great compliment. I think you visited there today. And you could see that every step is designed for the patient to flow smoothly through the healthcare system.
I mean, I liked your motto there, right?
Yeah.
I think it would be cool. What's the motto?
Our motto is every patient a VIP. So every patient should be treated like they're a very important person. So we don't, get the drums out when some significant person comes. And believe me, we have treated patients there from United States senators. We haven't gotten the president yet, but certainly a lot of people that people would think are VIPs, Supreme Court judges in Alabama. So, but we say that every patient is a VIP and we need to treat them as such. So to do that, we hire staff that are educated that way. That, look, treat every patient like it's your dad or your mom or your brother or your sister. That's our culture. So if I checked, I want 99.9% of the patients to say I was treated as such. So I demand that culture. And our physicians are encouraged to be efficient. So, hey, if your surgery is at 7 o'clock in the morning, it's going to be at 7. We're going to start at 7. When new doctors come to operate in our facility, they show up and they're used to the hospital where they, a 7 o'clock case may not actually start till 7:45 or 8 o'clock. So they come to our facility and they say it's a 6:30 case in the morning. They show up a little late and we go, where have you been? Let's go. And they go, man, you really mean 6:30, don't you? And we go, yes, we do. Because efficiency, what's worse than waiting to see the doctor? What's worse than being delayed while you're anxious about what's about to happen? So we've tried to eliminate those concerns of the patient and treat them very well. We bring on doctors that are reputable, that we know will do a good job. So not every doctor that shows an interest in our center do we say, come on board. We're very selective. And like I said, we do procedures that previously had not been done in an outpatient setting. But once we set certain safe criteria in place, we're able to do that now. And in the process, as I said, save the patient a great deal of discomfort and the healthcare system a great deal of money.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And one thing that you brought up is that with these outpatient services, you can actually cut down on costs. How does that work there? Well, why are costs lower when you do have specific outpatient centers?
Because some hospitals are such big behemoths that there's just a lot of expense that goes into running the place. Look at the salaries of everybody concerned. Look at all the facility maintenance and all of it. And it just adds up to a lot of money. So it's as if the payers have gotten accustomed to being servants to these big institutions, and the big institutions go to the insurance companies and negotiate contracts to allow them to make enough money to show profits, to keep their investors happy, and their CEO in whatever town he or she lives in happy with their local performance. It's, again, the bluntness thing has to be controlled some, but it's a wasteful system. So I could do things in a way that I can control cost, and the insurance companies are happy about it because they pay me 50 to 60% of what they pay the hospital for the very same thing. Now, one can ask, why is that the case? Well, ours is not to wonder why, ours to do and die. I don't get too entwined in, that was a Shakespearean quote, So I don't really get into why they do that, but I do think that it is a way to control healthcare cost. With what they pay us, we make a profit and we're doing very well. And that allows us then, Gustavo, to hire excellent staff. So we could probably do with 10% less staff, but we choose not to because that 10% is the icing on the cake for the patient. So we try to keep an excellently motivated workforce. We know that we spoil them. We know that we give them bonuses that other places don't usually. We do it on purpose.
And that's what really changes the care from being great care to being excellent care.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's
and
it.
I mean, when it comes to patient experience, that's all
That's
very
all that
important.
matters. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're still doing well. So there is no, again, can I make if I'm going to look at the P&L statement and line items where I spend money, can I sit down with my managers and say, you know what? Personnel cost, it's gone up by X. Can we cut it down by 10%? I can do that. But I don't want to. Because I see the faces of the 56 people that work downstairs in the operating room that are directly related to me. And I know their faces. And I go, now, which 5 of these do I want to fire or lay off so I could increase my profit by X? I say, no, I will not do that. But what I will do is demand that they continue to do a good job and try to increase the number of patients flowing through our center. And that's the way to increase profitability.
Yeah. And I like that you bring up there the downstairs and the people that you work with. I think you do a very good job in actually balancing the administrative work within your clinic to actually working hands-on with those doctors and still perform procedures yourself, right? So how do you find that balance there?
It's like I told you in the beginning, I will not, as long as I'm physically able and desirous, I will not give up the actual practice of medicine. So I myself go down to the surgery center and operate on the patients who are my patients that need my services. And basically downstairs, I do mostly spine surgery on the neck and lower back. And, I will do about as many cases as I've always done per week because I enjoy it. I'm not ready to give it up. And I could be efficient enough to do all of that, but still have enough time to manage the place. Look, management is not as hard as people try to make it. If you get yourself bogged down in every detail, you will not sleep at night. But if you hire good people that you could set the tone for and delegate to them, they'll do a good job for you, especially if you reward them for their efforts. So, people bellyache about management and all of this. Management is about motivation, it's about setting an example of what is expected. And then, in my experience, everybody will follow.
And do you think that the reason why it's easier for you to is because you still work hands-on with the physicians, so you can really see what they need? Because I feel like it would be super easy for you to just take an administrative position, so you can just lay back, the work is maybe easier, and then you can really pay attention to the nitty-gritty details and get lost in those. But instead of doing that, you're actually out there performing those same procedures with everyone that's working with you in the clinic, so you can actually know exactly what to focus on, right?
I don't want to be flippant, but it would be so boring not to do what I do and just sit up there looking at numbers and dealing with all this. I would get bored very quickly. Listen, learning how to do a certain operation and doing it well is a real passion, and you don't want to give that up if you don't have to. Now, you reach a certain age or a certain situation where you will, but to me, mixing healthcare practice with management is a pleasure because of what you said. I know what's going on. I know what's needed. So let's take an example of an operating room or 2 operating rooms that need a microscope that's used to do the surgeries. Well, a lot of places, they have 1 microscope for the 2 rooms. So they move this big giant piece of equipment from one room to the other. So here it goes down the hallway, bumping into walls, bumping into the door, being maybe slightly misadjusted because it needs to be very stable. You know what I say? No, buy 2 microscopes. Now, each room can be more efficient. Each surgeon can be happy that they have their own microscope and don't have to share it with that guy down the hall. So now we've capitalized and we buy equipment and we want to have the best equipment. We want it to be better than the hospital. Why else would the doctors come to us? They have to come to us because they think this is a very great place to work, above all. And then secondarily, we allow doctors to invest, to become investors in the center financially. And that gives them, as you said earlier, money is a motivator in itself. So if the place is managed well, now you have dividends given to these doctors. And they go, oh my goodness, I could do these surgeries at the hospital for 30 years and not get a penny beyond my own, income from my practice. But here I am in this center where I am, making a dividend every quarter. And that is a great thing. Let the doctors share in the benefits of healthcare, not just corporations.
And one thing that I think is so beautiful about what you said is the sense of ownership. I'm reading this book right now, and in the book, the author gives this example of a little kid that lived in a small household, so he had to sleep with his grandma every night, and he would always wet the bed. I mean, he was a little kid, he would always wet the bed. And the parents would do everything to try to make the kid stop wetting the bed. But one night they just decided, let's get him his own bed. And they got the kid his own bed. They brought him to the store to get his own bed. They let him pick his bed. He was getting his own bed. That's the sense he got. He got the bed, had his own little space in the house now to sleep. And that was his thing, He didn't want to hurt his bed in any way. So he stopped wetting the bed after that because it was his own bed. And I think that gets the same exact point that you're giving us here. I mean, buying the microscope for the doctor. Now this is my microscope. I want to take care of it. I want to use it in the best way possible for my patients. And I think, what I just gave is a very distant example, but I think it applies to exactly what you said.
So another way that in my world management works is I will sit down with the physicians and I will say to a general surgeon, so you're doing the following procedures in this outpatient center that we have. If you had some other piece of equipment, what other procedures would you bring to this center that you now do not bring? And they'll go, if we had this, we could do these cases here instead of at the hospital. So I'll just say, good, tell me what this is and I'll go get it. So I don't see management as being bookkeeping. I see management as making decisions that would increase the size of the pie. And to increase the size of the pie, that means doing new procedures that have not been done there before and doing more of them. So I challenge the physicians. Well, you give me some guidance. I'm the manager, but you're the doctor. What else can we do to enhance our productivity? And they'll often get, as you said, very excited. Now I have my own robot. Okay, get me the Da Vinci robot, or get the Da Vinci robot for me. I like to use good grammar. I don't like casual speak. Anyway, so that's what we do. And that's the next phase of our growth. We want to add operating rooms and add technology and equipment that would allow physicians to bring more patients to this setting. Why? Like we said, because those patients will be treated well, more personal attention, less discomfort, and less cost.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how did the practice itself start? Like right at the beginning? How did you go about starting the practice, and what did the growth process of it look like?
So after residency, when I was a resident, still training in neurosurgery, there was a local group of neurosurgeons practicing in Birmingham. They were very well thought of. It was probably the premier, so to speak, group of neurosurgeons in town. And as you trained as a resident at UAB in those days, everybody was secretly hoping they would be invited to join that group. So I was honored to be asked to come in and join that group. An early partner in that group was actually the man who trained me in neurosurgery that I consider to be my mentor. And so I joined that group of neurosurgeons for about 10 years. And during those 10 years, I sort of learned the ins and outs of how to manage a private practice. We all were in the same office, but we would go to different hospitals. So 2 of us would be in charge of this hospital, 2 would be in charge of that hospital. And it was a lot of hard work to build the practice. There came a time when the hospitals changed in character. They did not want physicians to come in who weren't their physicians. So they became possessive, as if doctors, kind of worked for them. So they began to say, well, let the 2 of you be full-time at this hospital and the 2 of us full-time at this hospital, etc. So now I felt like, well, I need to establish a new way of doing things. So I decided to start my own private practice. And by then I knew what it would take to create a private practice. And you need an office manager, you need nurses. And so we hired those people, and I moved to the hospital, actually rented space at the hospital, and began to practice from within the hospital with a new management team. But I've always maintained my private practice. I've never been employed or hired. I say that, Gustavo, because this is a big point with me. Most doctors now seem to come out of residency expecting to be employed or hired and working for a hospital or a hospital system. I don't like that. I like the idea of private healthcare where the physician, along with other physicians, unite to provide private practice care. I think that university hospitals or teaching hospitals are an appropriate place where physicians can be employed and paid a salary by the hospital to work there. I'm a big fan of academic medical centers doing that because I worked there for a while. I think that's good. But in the private community, I wish less doctors are motivated to be employed. I noticed that through that, physicians are less available to the public. I mean, in the old days when I started, you wanted to see a rheumatologist, you called him. You said, "Hey, David, would you see my patient so-and-so? They really need you." And he will say, "Send him over," or "I'll see them tomorrow." Now, try to get in with a rheumatologist. Yeah. Now, try to get in with certain specialists. I don't know what has happened, but they're just not as available. It's harder to get appointments. I wonder, and I may be wrong, but I wonder if their motivation to work has changed because they're employed. They want the check at the end of the month. And I wonder if some of the incentive to work and produce and take care of people has been diminished. So physician employment, hospitals want to employ doctors to be their doctors. I think a physician should work in a hospital because the hospital is a well-managed, clean, efficient place where the patient can get the best care. And I think the physician should be paid for the service he or she provide and not be employed by the hospital. And this will upset a lot of people, I know that. But it's just my personal opinion that when healthcare was more privately delivered with a lot of the doctors working for themselves, I felt that access was better than it is now. And therefore, this may be, anecdotal, but I don't like physician employment. So my practice has always been a private practice. I work for myself. Nobody pays me a salary. If I see enough patients and do a good job, they keep coming to me. And so over the years, availability is important. If a doctor is available to see new patients, that helps build a practice. And I've always been available. So I get patients from throughout the state of Alabama and from the Southeast and sometimes from farther away. And that has over the years allowed me to build a really good, strong practice. So I think there is a way to do it if you want to work hard and not be so dependent on others taking care of your, administrative needs.
Do you think, though, that it's become harder and harder for doctors to be able to employ themselves and actually be their own private practices?
It has. And I will admit that it is more difficult. But here again, capacity increases utilization. 20 years ago, or 30 years ago for certain, nobody thought that that is a model that should be followed or is followed, the employment by a hospital. So therefore, nobody even thought about that. But now in the last 10 years, it's become the new fad. So here we go. We created capacity to hire doctors. So now a lot of doctors want to be hired. So I think it's sort of a cause and effect thing. But I do think it's harder because of this trend. So a young doctor says, "Hey, why don't I just get employed?" But to me, that's what socialized medicine is, in a sense. You're an employed physician. Now, the hospital, people hire you and employ you for certain purposes that they have in mind. I am not sure that the patients benefit from that relationship. So if you want to quote me on this, you could say that I said, I am not sure that the patient benefits from physicians being employed by hospitals or by big corporations or what have you. I believe that they are better served when the physicians are out there working for themselves and having that direct relationship with the patient.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. That's awesome. I think that in terms of your own private practice, and one of the big reasons that you've been able to grow it to what it is today. I think part of it is because of your administrative background, having worked with big hospital corporations, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, and then also working at private practices to see the model that they followed and how they ran a private practice, right? So what do you think is the importance of having this background in working at a different private practice so that you can see how it's really run, or working in administration at a hospital to see how those hospital systems are really run?
Yeah, so that's the critical question, Gustavo. I mean, I know how a private practice can be run and should be run, so I do it. I also know the inefficiencies of being employed, and I've learned about that firsthand, especially when, I was in the business of employing doctors at HealthSouth, and I knew the negatives of that. So when I was in management, and I'm still in a different role as a manager, so I try to avoid that. But look, you cannot be successful in private practice. You're right. It's harder for a variety of reasons, but at least two are that payment for services provided by doctors has significantly dropped over the last several years.
From the insurance companies.
From the insurance companies, from Medicare, from, a variety of sources. So payment has declined. Running offices is very expensive. So with declining compensation and rising cost to run a clinic, this creates a deficit. It creates a problem. So they're not getting paid as much. And if you're not available to see more patients and be available for referrals, then because your psychology has changed, see, now there's something called, a good lifestyle. And I don't mind that. But the mentality is that I'm not as available as I used to be to see patients. So declining payment plus declining availability to see new patients has made it harder to run a private practice. But I think that if a group of doctors get together with the right management, that model can be very, very successful.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that, let's say, a group of doctors right out of residency, they all went to the same residency, let's say they're all in the same practice, let's call it orthopedics. You get a group of 7 orthopedic surgeons who went to the same residency, they come out of residency, they group together to start their private practice, as you said, with a group of physicians. Do you think that works at such a young point in their career?
So it'll be nice to have a blend. Hopefully one of those guys would have graduated 4 years ago, and the next year he brings another buddy from the year behind him. That model works very well. And I have several groups like that in our surgery center that you visited this morning. That's exactly the model that's there. And it works very well. It's still possible. Not every physician that works at our surgery center is employed. The majority are not. And they're doing very well. Exactly as you described. They know each other, they band together, and they create a group practice, well managed, and they do very well. And they're not answering to anybody, who comes to tell them how things should be done. When you work for somebody, they say, well, you could only spend 10 minutes with the patient because we got to do more patients. That should not be the case. So the model you described is possible. It exists. And in my opinion, I wish there'd be more of it.
Yeah. Let's say in that same scenario, if the doctors are young and they might not have all of the funds to start their own private practice, how can they actually go about getting something like that started?
Like I said, it'll be nice if you joined a group that is somewhat in existence already. So it's easier to be brought in as a new associate of that practice. But if that's not the case, I think banks are very willing to lend money to doctors to start a practice. Look, why do you think private equity wants to come and buy all these practices? You think it's because they like the doctors and they're also handsome and pretty and they love to just be their friends? Obviously, there's money in healthcare, right? So there's money percolating in a medical practice that the PE guys come to buy. The question becomes, are you able to manage those funds in a way that you could run a good practice and still make a good living? And the answer is yes. If that wasn't the case, the PE guys don't want you. They do not buy a balance sheet that's negative. What are they going to get out of it? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
So the very idea that PE is interested in buying physician practices all over the country is proof that there's money to be made in medicine. So why don't you doctors hire a good business advisor to be part of your group and figure a way to keep that money in the house, so to speak, and continue to run private practices. I have a PE company that wants to buy shares in our surgery center. They visited, and within 2 weeks, they want to make an offer. So you know what I asked them? I haven't yet, but I'm going to. I'm going to say, so you're going to give me a bunch of money to buy shares in my company. Well, that's very nice. What do you bring to the table? How are you going to make my practice better than it is right now? How will you make our surgery center function first medically better and then financially better? Tell me. Because if you could give me great answers to those two questions, we're going to have a partnership. But if you say, we're going to cut costs, I'm going to say,
we're going to fire a couple people.
Yeah, we're going to look at the bottom. I'm going to say, I'm not interested. You see?
Yeah.
So don't think that PE is chasing these medical practices because medical practices are not beneficial financially. They are. I hope that answered it.
Yeah, no, it does. And I think it also gives people hope to pursue that, right? Because then you can actually see that if private equities are pursuing these private practices, that means that these private practices must be able to make a good profit for themselves, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I love the word hope. That's what I want to instill in young doctors is you are the center of healthcare. Healthcare does not happen without doctors. There is no such thing as healthcare without doctors, unless you bring in midwives, I mean, that's good, But healthcare is doctors providing care. Now, they are assisted greatly by nursing, physical therapists, anesthesiologists, etc., etc., etc. When people talk healthcare in America, they close their eyes and they see a big building somewhere. Without the doctors doing their thing inside that hospital, there is no healthcare. The doctors need to reimagine themselves as the pillars of healthcare. They need to be reassured that they are loved and needed. They need to live up to those expectations, and they will do very well. And they should do very well. Because you know what doctors talk about in the doctor's lounge? Look, I've been up all night doing surgery. I'm going to make $250,000 this month. But the CEO of this company that owns this hospital is debating whether he should get 10 million in stock options or 20 million. And there go the guys, walking around with his suit looking good. And why is that? They ask. And I smile and go, well, think about it. Maybe you'll come up with the answer. You work for him. So accept your role as a subservient player in the play.
Yeah. And I think that in our society, it's become very easy to take these easy positions, right? Oh, I'm just going to go work for them. I'll make a good living for myself, but I won't have my own ownership of anything, right?
Yes.
And I think that gets to your point there too.
And Gustavo, they come to my office saying, Dr. Swaid, I'm getting tired of this. They guarantee me the salary, but after 2 years, man, they're getting mean. Now they come tell me how many patients I must see, how much vacation I could take, etc., etc. And I go, well, there you go. Cry me a river. Maybe you should have thought about before you signed that silly little contract. Again, I am not de-emphasizing the importance of hospitals and administrations of hospitals. I'm just saying that there should be a separation between what they should provide and what the doctors provide. These are two different camps that may be slightly antagonistic to each other, but they should learn to work together in a way that's beneficial to both.
Yeah. And we're talking about this in terms of healthcare, but I think it's a societal issue, honestly.
Yes.
I mean, it's so easy for us to get out of college and get a good job at a big bank and just stay there and make a comfortable living. And for many people, that is the way to go. You can learn a lot from going that route. But at the same time, I think that for many people, it reduces the entrepreneurial mind that you can have and that I think we used to have more of, right? We want innovation. And with people just taking these passive approaches to life, I think we really miss out on that.
I love it. I love what you just said. I mean, I had a friend tell me at age 64, 6 years ago, Swaid, you're crazy. At 64, you want to build a whole new hospital, basically? Why are you just not retiring? Saw him about 6 months ago. He said, man, this has been a great thing you built here because I just had surgery there himself. So, yeah, entrepreneurship is the backbone of American culture, of American economy. And I think that we should encourage it. Now, it may not work, but I am not giving up on the fact that we should continue to encourage entrepreneurship. As the poet Robert Frost said, I will take the road less traveled. And right now, the road less traveled seemed to be support yourself, be independent, be in private practice. And I think that People need to start looking back on that issue and taking that road. I don't know what the government can do to encourage physicians to be independent, but I can tell you it's hurting the government for this employment model. And I think some people in Congress are beginning to take notice of that issue. And I think that they should come up with ways to incentivize doctors to remain independent.
Yeah. I know that we talked about the entrepreneurial aspect of things, but knowing the time to harness this entrepreneurial mind, I think, is also really important. The reason it worked really well for you was because you had this background in a lot of things, right? Yeah. So I did mention working at a bank, working for a consulting firm. I think that that's super important because you can learn all of the fundamentals that you're going to need later on. You learn that through working at hospital administration, working at other private practices, seeing exactly what they did, right? So I think that there's a big aspect of importance to that, but at the same time, people shouldn't feel locked to that position.
Agreed. And so it's a word to you guys in college who are in pre-med. Get exposure to as many aspects of life as possible. Don't be so focused on pre-med. Yeah, work in a bank one summer. Learn how loans are given and who they are giving to and why they're given. Learn about how to finance a project. Learn how to leverage your education in a way that finances can follow that. So I love your point. Learn about how people, my son they shadow people, Christian shadows at the surgery center to learn, what is going on in healthcare. Kaysen went and spent time with the very head CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield. He wants to know, how does that aspect of healthcare run? So yes, expose yourself to every facet of it, and that will give you that confidence and the wherewithal to make decisions later to say, hey, I want to do exactly what Gustavo suggested. I'm going to band together with 5 of my buddies, and we're going to open this great practice, and we're going to put it out there that we are great doctors. We trained at Georgetown or Harvard or University of Alabama, UAB, or whatever. And we're going to provide great care. We're available. Come see us. Do you know how many people call me every week asking, can you help me get a doctor? And I say to myself, what happened to the doctors? I know hundreds of them. Why are they not available? So there you go.
Yeah. And getting to your point there, I'll give a personal example. One of the most important things that I've ever heard is that from one of my professors that I value a lot, he said, Gustavo, get exposure to as many different things as you can. As many different things as you can.
Yeah.
And honestly, throughout my time in school now, that has really been driving the decisions that I make. I like getting out of my comfort zone now. At the beginning, it was a little challenging to get out of my comfort zone, but now I literally look forward to getting out of my comfort zone. That's where I learn the most. And to give a personal example, so I'll be working at Bain & Company this coming summer, and I know many people might see that as very disconnected from healthcare. But I honestly cannot wait for it because I'm going to learn so much from this experience. And I think that I'm going to learn a skill set, even if I am working on a defense case, even if I'm working on a private equity case, that I would not have learned from any other industry. And just because I am working at that company doesn't mean that I cannot apply that knowledge within the company to still achieve my dreams of changing healthcare, of improving healthcare, or even in the future, use those skill sets somewhere else to still achieve that dream.
Perfect. I think that's perfect. And I think that exposure to that aspect, I think they're financial in some way. You will learn about finance and you will learn about how to apply that to healthcare, getting into it and also carrying it forward. It is so important to get exposure to as many things as possible because it will always come back to help you in your career.
Mm-hmm. Very well said. I just want to go back a little bit to the private equities with private practices.
Can I say something about private equity?
Please.
I think it can be a good thing. It could be a good thing if the people who have the money to invest, these are the private equity guys, have a true societal interest at heart. If their motives are good, where they say, look, maybe together we could be stronger than you being alone, say to a group of physicians or a practice. And what we mean is this: we could bring technology to bear, we could bring things to the table that would make your practice much better in patient care, followed by great financial benefit. If that's the motive, then we both can do well. You physicians can do well, but first the patients do well, and then we private equity guys get a good return on our investment. If that's the way it works, That's perfect. For instance, I want to buy a robot. It's expensive. But if the private equity guy said, hey, we'll get the robot, we'll pay for it. Now, you could do a lot more surgeries, and as a return for that, we'll do better when the bottom line rises significantly. So now I see, okay, these guys have an interest in us becoming better than we are in providing healthcare. Then it's good for everybody. But if private equity says, those guys are making some money, let's dip in on some of it, so to speak. I like to speak just simple language because I don't like complicated financial speech. Well, that's not good. I don't like that.
Yeah. I think, with their funds, we can achieve things that we wouldn't have been able to achieve otherwise.
Then it's good.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. I learned a lot. This was awesome. Had a great conversation with you. Had a great time actually going to the medical center and seeing everything. Very impressed by everything. Do you have any other thoughts or ideas?
I just want you next time to take the time to change into a scrub suit, go into the operating room. We'll inform the patient and they will generally be welcoming of that, and see how things are really done inside the operating rooms and inside the hallways of the hospital, so you get hands-on experience. So maybe on the next visit, I'd love to see you do that.
Yeah, I would love to do that.
Yeah,
I would love to do that.
I think you have a great personality. I could almost feel the excitement you have for having a great future in healthcare. I think you want to do that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Gustavo.
Thank you for being here. It was wonderful having you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Gustavo Franco podcast. We hope our exploration of the world of healthcare has been insightful and thought-provoking for you. The opinions expressed here are ours and of our guests, and should not be considered professional advice. This podcast is a collaborative learning experience for both the producers and listeners. While we strive to convey accurate and up-to-date information, we acknowledge that our research may have limitations. We encourage all of our listeners to supplement their knowledge by conducting their own research. If you enjoyed this episode and want to stay up to date on our future releases, make sure to subscribe or follow us on your preferred podcast platform and social media. We highly value your feedback, so please don't hesitate to reach out with your thoughts, questions, or suggestions for future topics. Together, we can foster a more educated America and contribute to a more effective healthcare future. Thank you for joining us on this healthcare exploration.